Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a privilege to be speaking at this very prestigious annual conference on a subject which is very close to my heart: waste, their value, and the business opportunities, as well as the challenges that exists. Personally and through my organization, we work in the spirit of partnership with the government, and with a focus being on citizens' engagement with the government. We have been hearing a great deal of discussion on business. And I feel, just as my fellow speakers have articulated, that business opportunities as well as immense wealth lies in wastes. And I think nearly all speakers have impressed upon some aspect or other. Touching upon the title of the session, I think end of the day, each one of us are consumer of products. And the waste is generated from all the products that we use. So whereas the sectors that have been talked about, but I'd like to share and have a conversation on each one of us as citizens and consumers of all the products that we use in our daily lives. Today we hear the word smart city. So when the smart city tag comes in, the city managers are not always able to figure out how to manage all the challenges that come about. And I'm not being patronizing here. The citizens throw up a lot of data. The smart thing would be to listen to what the citizens are saying and convert that, or rather I should say engineer it, back to the citizens' use for everyday life. Finding solutions to problems that exist in our daily lives are definitely the way to start any of the business aspects that we have talked about till now. There are two basic aspects, Mr. Khosla, that I'd like to highlight here. The first point relates to policies and policy making, which, by the way, is expected to resolve social problems, and then identifying the policy problems. Very often we see there are knee-jerk reactions to a problem, and a decision is made, and then a policy is also created. And that policy does not necessarily resolve the problem, and yet it is there for implementation. Policies are often seen to have been structured in isolation. And when we look at two different policies dealing with a subject or an aspect of waste, we find there are contradictions. So imagine when you go to implement the policy, what chaos results. Yesterday, I heard quite a few things which were spoken about, but there is another point also in policy making, which I have personally faced, is that terms of reference when a committee is formed to make a policy, to formulate a policy, is not completed and a policy is declared. So therefore, at that point of time, the whole aspect of the problem for which the policy was being structured is left actually incomplete. I have been associated with creating the policy for the safe transportation of school children in Maharashtra. It was a project which I did, and the government had invited me some years back to translate that into a policy. It gave me first-hand knowledge of understanding all the challenges and difficulties that the government officers face, but it's our government, so you accept with what's and all and try to make sense of it. Now, when this policy of safe transport was made, and mind you, transportation is a huge aspect which is talked about in Mumbai and indeed in most of the urban areas, the cost of fuel, congestion, air pollution, noise pollution, you name it, there are plenty of these challenges which are there. Now, when we talked about getting busing the children, We don't look at the parking issues, which is an infrastructure issue. So like that, I just gave a small example. There are many such aspects which are correlated, but are often left on the side to deal with separately. But then, the whole picture and the holistic, as my previous speaker, Mr. Gulati, mentioned, the holistic approach is often challenged. Yesterday, Mr. Ranjit Bhattakur mentioned in his opening statement, what is the waste management policy? We don't have one policy dealing with waste, but we actually have 6. I wonder if all of you know. Do you know that there are 6 rules? Yes? Okay. Let me cite them. The first one is rules BMW, that is biomedical waste. Rules C and D, these are all of year 2016. You only hear about the municipal solid waste rules of 2016, but that's only one of them. Then you have the rules C and D, construction and debris waste. Then you have electronic waste. Then you have hazardous waste, which includes wastewater, exhaust gases, including biomedical. And then, of course, we have our most commonly known one, municipal solid waste. And then you have the plastic wastes. Now, each of these rules are addressing the management of that particular waste. And however, each of the wastes are connected. Let me give you, and I speak, as I said, as a consumer, as from the household. You have a strip of medicine, for example. The medicine, and it has expired. You have to dispose of that particular strip. What will you do? Under which policy will it go, the disposal? The citizens are clueless, the consumers are clueless. Therefore, the handlers of the waste are equally clueless when it goes to implement. Because very often, we talk about the landfill. The landfill is such an issue. When we generate, you don't have to go far, and I'm just speaking simple language. Your home has every kind of waste, except perhaps the nuclear waste. So when you are disposing of this waste, a lot depends how that waste will create into a business opportunity is how you dispose it. You have heard perhaps in previous sessions about waste pickers, who are a great chunk of our economy. Their handling of waste, if we don't give the product which has got optimum value, we are not being responsible in creating a circular economy from that particular waste. So the challenge of each of these aspects is how these rules can be, for the purpose of implementation, be bound together. Because when you go through, when you peruse these rules, I don't want to get into further detail, you will find that there are points which are similar, convergent, and there are conflicts. So if rules contradict each other, when it comes to implementation, what sort of implementation are we going to have? And that is, a prime example you will find is Deonar when we are in Mumbai city. In that, let me give you a little business example. Some years back, actually my first visit to Deonar, Mr. Khosla, was when I went to see how bricks could be manufactured from municipal solid waste of the dumping ground. I do not know how many of you in Mumbai know about this, but this was a brainchild of a chemical engineer who was senior officer of the BMC, of the municipal corporation, and they created this. I have used these bricks in Tony Malabar Hill. It works beautifully, but it has not gone into commercial production. You need to ask why. As long as humankind is alive, the raw material will always be there because each one of us will generate municipal solid waste. And as long as humankind is there, you will always need construction, that is housing. And for that, these bricks are highly useful. A simple way, perhaps, but for some reason it hasn't taken off. A little study in that will go a long way, and I would request our Club of Rome and other experts to delve into it. The second point I was going to dwell on is on the generation of waste. who are the generators, both commercial and domestic. Because unless certain identifications have taken place, that is of the generators, what wastes are being generated, their solutions, particularly to that, will not come about in a more holistic manner. So some of the crucial issues that I wanted to highlight was to define decentralized system for waste processing. Because by doing so, you take into consideration transport costs and efficiency also. If you see Mumbai city, and I'm giving you the example of the city we are in, not every area generates the same kind of waste. For example, a commercial area will generate a lot of dry waste. So the solution and the business opportunities of such waste will be somewhat different to say where there are more gardens and you have more biodegradable waste being generated in that area. So a little study in that would go a long way. So decentralized system is one of the best ways to tackle household waste and the waste generated in particular areas. We heard a lot about technologies. And today, technologies are all over the place, particularly to deal with biodegradable wet waste. But what we do not have is an audit of the technologies which are today marketed and with very tall claims at times. So people are anxious and are a little apprehensive as to which technology to go for. So an appeal to the government would be to create a system of audit by which technologies are certified, or if not certified, at least categorized, and a proper mechanism is set in place for the citizens to choose, to have the freedom to choose and decide for themselves. One of the other aspect, when we look at composting, for example, because wet waste is something each one of us in every household, as a matter of fact, even here when we had lunch, has been generated. Composting is all very fine, but when the fertilizer or the end product is produced, it can't always be utilized by where it is being produced. There is something called the National Fertilizer Registry, if I'm not mistaken. However, there is no mechanism as to how the excess fertilizer can be brought into the system and can go to the rural market. So there are many such disconnects or many such gaps which are possible to address by correlating all the rules of 2016 that have come into existence. We also have many associations. We have the Plastic Association, we have the Municipal Solid Waste Association, but somewhere along we find that the associations are not proactive enough to come into civil society. My previous speaker spoke about awareness. Certainly awareness of various kinds are necessary, but then joining of hands, joining of our own resources is essential before the nature's resources can be addressed and the challenges that lie therein. The partnership of manufacturers and products is equally important in light of the Municipal Solid Waste Rules of 2016, because the rules have mandated that manufacturers of certain items, in the previous session, a mention was made about sanitary napkins, that they have to provide a mechanism for taking it back. But no one knows about it, least of all has the manufacturer made any attempt to inform the public about it. So therein lies the question, where are our business ethics, where are our social ethics, and where are we heading? Nature has given us bountiful resources, but if we keep challenging nature the way we have been doing, I'm fairly certain the resources will just disappear, and we will be wondering, going back to what Mr. Bhattaku showed as the first clip, if any one of you were here, that we will be monarchs of nothing, actually. I have tried to bring about, in a very simple way, of engaging with citizens, because that's what I do. We need to have conversations everywhere to bring about amongst ourselves as to what we are doing right and what we are doing wrong. The government is not an ogre, and the government is not the devil. That is something which I can say quite strongly, even though sometimes it is quite challenging and frustrating to get things going. But then there is huge amount of talent in the government officers, and I think we need to work in a total spirit of partnership to bring about the resource management that we are talking about and the richness of our diversity being harnessed into properly implementable solutions. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts.